need to be careful of what we're trying to do. There are a number of steps that we've taken in Australia which are total in defiance of basic human rights. Some of the anti-terrorism laws would be a downright disgrace even in a fascist country. We're the only, at the time I know, and I don't think anyone else has copied it since, although I haven't checked, we were the only country to legislate for the secret detention of people that the authorities knew to be innocent, not only of any crime, but even of any evil thought. And the ground for their secret detention was that they might have observed something which they did not even know they've observed, but which the authorities believe could be of interest to them in an anti-terrorist inquiry. Now, how could you get a broader power than that for secret detention? And if it happens, you can't talk about it, you can't report it, 5 years jail. If you talk to your wife about it, that technically would be subject to 5 years jail for both of you, for her having listened to you and for you having talked to her. Now, this is the kind of power appropriate to a dictatorial country. Now, the Liberal Party brought it in, the Labour Party did not oppose it, and the Labour Party now administer it. I suppose, you know, I'm prepared to believe that when the Liberal Party brought it in, they might have hoped the Labour Party would oppose it, and then they'd say, you're soft on terrorism, and think that might help win an election. Now, that's not a noble reason for putting that kind of power in a piece of legislation. But the Labour Party now is equally guilty because they're the ones administering that power. Now, because reporting is not allowed, we wouldn't know if the power has not been used. If it's not been used, it's not needed. Get rid of it. Or we wouldn't know it's been used in 10,000 cases, in which case, quite clearly, the authorities are using an arbitrary power to gross excess, again, should be got rid of. We need to look very carefully at what we do and make sure that we do not arm the terrorists by unjust actions of our own. We can take some lessons. I don't think the solution to the terrorist problem is more policing powers or doubling the size of ASIO. And look at the new ASIO building in Canberra. It's an opulent disgrace. Again, I suppose, suitable to a police-style country. But we could perhaps learn a little from some of the problems that have occurred in Britain. Why do Muslim youths born in Britain, brought up in Britain, educated in Britain, join terrorist cells? What arguments have the clerics used? We're never going to change a fundamentalist cleric or a fundamentalist. If they want to be a terrorist and that's the way they're made, well, so be it, and they're the enemies of mankind. But what we can do in the West, in enlightened countries, is at least try to have policies that do not make it easier for the fundamentalists to recruit people who would otherwise contribute productively to a stable, peaceful society. And I really believe in the war in Iraq, for example, that Britain, America, and we have made it easier for those fundamentalists to recruit people. And if the government is now saying we need more police powers, if we need a much larger ASIO, which this last report they had seemed to be suggesting, then maybe our participation in that war. I had a meeting, it was a religious meeting of all faiths in Chaconta some years ago. And the Islamic leaders there have done an extraordinary job, the moderate leaders, of maintaining dominance of in the religious organizations of the largest Islamic country in the world. But they were saying, you know, Western policy is making our job harder. We're succeeding, but you're making it harder. Now, these are the things that we should take into account when we're constructing our own policies. And we certainly should not go to war in a place like Iraq on the basis of a whim or just because Saddam Hussein was a terribly evil man. If we're going to, you know, I believe that both Britain, America, and Australia knew that their reasons for going to war were false. Hans Blix was getting more cooperation in the search for weapons of mass destruction. He said he'd need another 3 or 4 months to complete his inquiries. Why not let him complete his inquiries? And if he then said, no, there are weapons of mass destruction, all right, you've got a legitimate cause for war. But the more likelihood thing was he was going to say, no, there's no evidence. He wasn't able to uncover any, and the victors weren't able to uncover any. And what had been said about weapons of mass destruction by the British and the Americans in particular was later, you know, proved to be false. And I believe I knew it was false at the time. And let me give one example. I had letters from people in London saying it's very uncomfortable knowing that Saddam Hussein could have a missile over London within 45 minutes dangling chemical or biological weapons and dropping them over the city. Well, I knew that wasn't true, but the Blair government left that dangling out there as though it were true. Now, for many, many years, the Americans have monitored pretty well every missile that takes off anywhere in the world because they want to monitor any threat that could develop to America. And they would have known, and the British would have known, that Saddam Hussein had missiles that could maybe go in a wobbly way about 300 miles, but certainly not from Iraq to London, certainly not from Iraq to European cities. They knew that.